welcome to the Riyal Deal, coming to you from the Al Arabiya English studios. This is your weekly bulletin, bringing you all the latest business news, headlines and analysis from Saudi Arabia. Coming up, Saudi Arabia's stock market has been riding high, adding tens of billions to its market cap on reports of majority foreign ownership in the Arab world's biggest exchange. Well, as Q3 ends, we take a look at how the Saudi economy has performed and where it's heading. And as the Saudi labour market continues to transform, and with unemployment hovering around record lows, we take an in-depth look at the jobs market and speak to two experts about hiring trends, challenges and remuneration. And as Saudi Arabia marks its 95th National Day, we take a look back at the kingdom's achievements and meet one man whose organisation has been very busy amidst the celebrations. Welcome. We begin with the fact that the third quarter is drawing to a close, and Saudi Arabia's stock market has been riding high these last few weeks, adding tens of billions to its market cap. Well, on Wednesday last week, the Tadawul All-Share Index jumped more than 5%. That's the most daily increase in more than 5 years. Well, this happened after a board member of the Capital Market Authority said that majority foreign ownership could come into effect by the end of the year. And that's boosting interest in the Arab world's biggest stock exchange. While Saudi bank stocks have been surging, and as analysts predicted, billions in potential inflows to the market. Well, I'm here now with Jameel Ahmed, who is a global markets commentator and chief analyst at GTC. Jameel, thank you for joining us once again. Always a pleasure to see you. So we've had the last full trading week of Q3. Let's take a look back at how the Saudi economy has performed so far this year. How are things looking?
In one word, impressive. And I'm about to tell you exactly why it's impressive. If you look at some of the most recent statements that have come out from the IMF, they actually recently upgraded the GDP forecast for 2025 from 3% to 3.5%. Firstly, this is also impressive because it completely bucks the global trend where we're seeing global economic weakness. In fact, the world economy is expected to weaken in 2025 compared to 2024. And also next year, we're expecting to see a weaker global economic outlook too. But sticking with Saudi Arabia just for a couple of seconds, government-led projects are certainly helping the domestic economy continue to expand and also attracting international attention. We're seeing a lot of growth because of this and non-oil GDP as the economy continues to diversify heading into the 2030 vision. And also we're seeing increased demand and growth in the export sector. So other economies are now importing goods from Saudi Arabia. That's also supporting the economy, but the outlook also looks promising for 2026 too. So despite global economic weakness, it does look like Saudi Arabia can be somewhat of a shining star, even if it is standing a little bit more isolated compared to where we're expecting other global economies to be heading.
Okay, so clearly outperformance for the Saudi economy in 2025. Do you see that continuing into 2026, Jameel?
I do, and not only do I, but also do the OECD. The OECD expect for the Saudi economy to actually grow more than forecast even just a couple of months ago for 2026 as well. I think the international-led events, the number of visitors that are going to be heading into Saudi Arabia too, are going to be supporting sentiment. But overall, we do actually expect for the Saudi economy to be growing more in 2026 than what it is showing in 2025. So basically the platform's now being, I would say, laid out for the Saudi economy to continue to outperform heading into the remainder of the 2020s. I think that also we have to watch some global events, but typically because of the number of government-led projects, because of all the projects that are also taking place heading to beyond 2030 as well, namely the World Cup and other international events that will be taking place. That's also going to be helping demand as well as investment within Saudi Arabia.
Okay, so clearly quite a few factors that are contributing to this outperformance. I mean, are there any others that spring to mind?
There is. If you look at the region and what's going on across the world, obviously we got a world economic outlook that's been weaker, led by the Trump tariffs and the tariffs that are being put on other economies that not isolated to the likes of Asia, South Asian economies, Africa, Latin America. Obviously, we all know what's happening between the US and China, the US and European Union, and so forth. But actually, those tariffs are not so much impacted on the GCC region. So this is helping shield I would say the region as well as Saudi Arabia away from some of that tariff negativity. At the same time, of course, the world economy remains very much interconnected. So a more solid economic outlook worldwide would also be supportive to growth in the GCC. I think what's also helped matters as well is we've had a substantial weakness in the US dollar. When the US dollar is weakened at its fastest level, if we look at the first half of the trading year, more than 50 years, that also supports investment into the region because you've got currencies that are pegged to the US dollar. Therefore, you have somewhat of a discount if you're looking at then investing within the region because it just becomes more attractive. Lower interest rates also in the United States are helping matters, and I think that's something that will also help matters headed into 2026. Lower investments in terms of borrowing from banks and so forth, that also provides an added stimulus, and I think that's something that will help the Saudi Arabian economy, not only as we start to conclude 2025, but also as we start to head into 2026, because all of the consensus and the statements out there seem pretty clear. In the United States, interest rates will continue to go lower, which means they will also continue to go lower within the GCC region.
Okay, Jameel, so just to wrap up, in summary, the economy seems to be doing well. The stock market, as I was saying in the introduction, has been doing well, especially the last couple of weeks. Obviously, these two things, there's a correlation between them both. Do you see them both continuing to outperform through to 2026?
There definitely is a correlation, but in fact, if you look at other, I would say, global economies, that correlation doesn't always bear fruit. Sometimes you have a stock market that's performing very well, but say a domestic economy that's not performing so well. I think what's happened in Saudi Arabia that bucked that trend because you have the Saudi stock market and the economy that are mirroring the same progression, is essentially you've got an economy that's opening up. It's becoming somewhat of the little engine that will, because obviously the Saudi economy has also always had potential, but that potential is now starting to be realized, and we're just at the beginning of those steps. On top of this, the news this week about the potential increase in the allocations that foreign investors are allowed into Saudi markets, that led to the biggest one-day gain in 5 years. Should that move also materialize, you're going to have even further investment into the Saudi stock market. Some of the estimates are billions and billions of inflows that could enter Saudi Arabia. So essentially, as the economy continues to open up, as financial markets continue to open up within Saudi Arabia, and all of the activity continues to take place led by government projects, then yes, that trend of looking at the Saudi Arabian stock market will continue. And it's also helped by increased sentiment towards emerging markets based on US interest rate policy too.
Okay, well, we're going to have to leave it there. We're out of time. Thank you very much indeed, though, Jameel Ahmed, Global Markets Commentator and Chief Analyst at GTC. Thanks again. Now, in the context of ongoing economic and social reforms and efforts to diversify Saudi Arabia's workforce, demand for talent is significant. Construction, finance, hospitality, energy, logistics and tech. Those are just some of the sectors seeing strong demand for people. Well, the national unemployment rate, including both Saudi and non-Saudi nationals, is just under the 3% mark. And when you look at the jobless rate amongst women, especially Saudi women, we're seeing some of the lowest numbers on record. Well, today we're going to take a closer look at how skills are being aligned with market demand and what some of the trends and challenges are in this thriving jobs market. Well, to discuss this further, I'm joined here in the studio by Justin McGuire, who is the founder of MCG Talent. That's a recruiting agency with roots in Riyadh and Hong Kong, as well as Dubai and Singapore. Thank you very much indeed for coming to see us, Justin. A pleasure to see you. I just want to start by asking you, you're labelled as being a talent consultancy. I just wondered how that makes you different from a sort of classic executive search headhunting firm.
Okay, so what I would say the difference is we've been in the region for 17 years now. So what we can do is we advise on board alignment, we advise on the types of talent that you need, we advise on skills where there's ready available talent, for example, for Saudiization talent, and also where you need to bring in international talent. So from a consultancy and advisory perspective, we've got the background and experience because we've had footprint in the region for a long time to help clients and customers go through that.
Okay, so just tell us a bit about the main sectors that you operate in.
Yeah, so it's really in the digital transformation, marketing, communications, creative media world. That's where we've got a well-known name, well-known brand. Not so much in construction and healthcare. However, if you need a media or advertising professional or marketing professional in those spaces, we work with people in that space. So that gives us actually quite a good broad view of what's going on in the market right now.
Okay, where are you seeing the most activity at the moment?
Interestingly, this year in Saudi, we've seen a bit of a slowdown for international talent. Okay, I think there's a few reasons for that. First of all, Saudiization. I think it's important for us to sort of make your audience aware that that's really, I think, kicked into overdrive for many brands this year. What that's done, therefore, is it's prolonged interview processes. Most businesses now, be those private sector or public sector, are prioritising Saudi talent. And there's, frankly, still at a senior level, there's quite a limited supply. So it just drags out interview process and take them longer. I think also, the days of, a couple of years ago, my business, for example, did phenomenally well from the consultancy space. There's a lot of consultants going out to Saudi. There's a lot of consultants advising government. You've seen a stark slowdown in that space. And that really is to do with recalibration, rescoping of big, large construction projects, and a focus on things like the Expo 2030 and World Cup, where they've aligned with much more Saudiization hiring. And the senior talent that we're seeing come in, really, they need to go in and understand that they're probably going to be nurturing a role for a Saudi to take over at some point.
So what's a sort of a typical role or profile that you'll be seeking to fill in Saudi Arabia in a given week or month?
So for me to be involved in my team, we only work on the senior level assignments. So it would be senior or one or two levels under that. So that's where we're seeing, because I can directly comment on that. We wouldn't do the more junior level positions.
So you're positioning CEOs, CFOs?
Within our niche, yes, okay. Yes. And that's, consultants as well, so helping partners, helping senior executives move out there. And that really, there's been areas which have slowed down and areas where we've seen things, still moving at a reasonable pace.
Okay, so let's talk a bit more about Saudiization. Is there the local talent that's needed to fill some of these jobs? I mean, some of them are, presumably very sort of niche roles. And, the Saudi economy is still maturing, isn't it? So, are there the right people locally for some of these senior roles, or do you, by definition, have to go outside Saudi to find the right people?
Yeah, look, when we sit down, this is part of the advisory piece, when we sit down and we're briefed on a position, particularly if it's relatively niche, we have to just be very clear that if you really want a Saudi for this, you're probably going to have to pay above market share because there is really limited supply. And secondly, I would advise getting an international talent just because it needs to broaden it out. Otherwise, you're going to maybe just have one or two people in the interview process, and that's a very risky place to be, quite frankly. So Saudi hiring is still incredibly tough. I think anyone that tells you otherwise is frankly not telling you the truth, because it's a supply and demand, the market where the supply is in short supply at very niche skill sets. And from a senior level, given the way the market's matured, from a junior level, you talk to businesses, they've got a young, enthused, highly enthused generation that are coming into the workforce. At the more senior end, particularly in the private sector, and particularly in spaces that I work in, like media, marketing, digital transformation, there is actually quite a limited supply, because traditionally that wasn't seen as a glamorous place to go. Normally, if it was in the private sector, you'd see Saudis moving into banking, you'd see Saudis moving into more traditional legal space, more traditional spaces, not so much the areas where we get involved in, and where you're seeing a lot of Saudi investment now go.
We're going to be talking about Cristiano Ronaldo a bit later in the show. Don't worry, you're not involved in that segment there. But there is this perception, isn't there, that people who go to Saudi Arabia are going to make really big money, like Cristiano Ronaldo. And, he's sort of out there on social media sort of showing the world what a glamorous life he leads there. But when it comes to the remuneration for the sorts of people you're positioning, are you seeing any trends, any changes to the packages? Are they getting smaller? What sort of trends are you noticing?
Yeah, Tom, that's a really good question. And to be frank with you, what we're seeing is a knock-on effect of the UAE oversaturation of talent now as well. You've got a lot of people that have moved out to the GCC, initially with a keen interest in moving into the Dubai market, but realising that A, they're not getting the salaries that they wanted, and B, just quite frankly, there aren't the jobs. So they're broadening their search out to the wider GCC. Therefore, Saudi is becoming on their radar. And the more they're learning about Saudi, the more they want to go there. But there's a reality check that a lot of people need to have when they look at Saudi. First of all, Saudi's quite aware that there is a keen interest on, because of what's going on in the rest of the world right now and a slowdown, and a lot of eyes are on the GCC, that Saudi, a lot of businesses in Saudi are woken up to this. So it's a very different, like 3, 4, maybe 5 years ago, we were putting people into Saudi for, let's call them Cristiano Ronaldo wages almost, right? Now,
telephone numbers out.
Now people are quite real, and actually And they have to be. There's a few that's not the case in all instances. But we'll call up some executives, and frankly, they're quite happy in the position they're in. For those that are in Dubai in a job that we headhunt to move to Saudi, they want big increases. But for those that are active and looking, you can actually push them through for similar salaries to what they get in Dubai, which was never the case before.
What about women in the workplace? Are you seeing more women being positioned in roles in Saudi Arabia? Because that's a very big part of Vision 2030, get women into the workforce. Are you seeing that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we're actually asked for really balanced sort of shortlists from customers and clients now. But even when you go and visit offices in Saudi, you'll see that there's a very strong female workforce there. I noticed that particularly in media communications companies that I work with, really high population or density populated with women within those workforces. So I'm just seeing more and more demand and interest from international female talent to want to move there in a way that I never saw before.
Right, okay, so things are clearly changing. What are some of the biggest myths and misconceptions do you think about the jobs market in Saudi Arabia? Are there things that you hear time and time again and you say to people, talking to someone who might be positioning from London, they've got this idea about Saudi Arabia that's totally wrong? What sort of stuff do you hear?
Yeah, the stuff you still hear is more that people simply don't know how much it's transformed and changed. I think that's the biggest thing that we encounter. Can I, if I'm a lady, can I walk outside? I heard I can't drive. I heard, there's all these traditional sort of misconceptions that you still need to sort of hold people's hands through. Saudi's done a very good job of publicising itself now. I think, even when I was back in the UK in the summer, you could see Saudi tourism promoting, etc. So that in a way that it's never been before. So people's eyes are being opened, but there's still a strong stereotype that we have to overcome. And because of the footballers' salaries, probably the biggest one that we get is people think they're going to go there and retire in a couple of years. And frankly speaking, that just isn't happening anymore.
It would be nice, but not going to happen, as you say.
Listen, we get a fee on that, so it's even nicer for us as well. So, but that's just not the case.
And you've been going there for quite some time, and you've presumably seen some of these changes for yourself, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a license in Saudi, so every time I go there, it feels different. And the thing that I want to just get across is there's just a real excitement and buzz and such a belief in the leadership there that you don't really get in many places. Probably the UAE is one of the only other places where I've encountered that. So everyone believes in the vision that where Saudi's going. And even with recalibration of big projects like NEOM, the line, etc., there's still a faith that it will happen and it will come. And there's people that are very proud. Saudi's incredibly proud. And I think when people move over there, the hospitality, the friendliness, and generally how welcome they are into the environment, people are really sort of blown away by that. But there is limited, I must stress this point, at the moment in 2025, there really has been a limited amount of international talent going over there from our side and from many of I suppose my peers that I talk to in recruitment as well. This year in Saudi has been a real realignment and focus on Saudiization, I must say.
Okay, it sounds like that answers my next question. My last question actually. What are the biggest challenges that you're facing at the moment? Is that it? A sort of a little bit of a drying up of the demand for talent.
It's not just a drying up. There is international talent that wants to go into Saudi, but there's limited businesses that will take international talent right now, and interview processes are incredibly long. And I must also say that the current economic climate there's been a knock-on effect into Saudi. I think there are fewer international businesses prepared to make those big, expensive moves into Saudi right now because everyone's kind of waiting to see how the global scene is going to play out. Trump tariffs have had a knock-on effect on certain pieces of business that we've even had in Saudi. Saudi doesn't like uncertainty. The oil price has wavered over the years, and I've learned from being out in the region for a long time that when that price of oil wobbles a fair bit, it does impact recruitment.
All right. Well, thank you very much. You've been really generous with your time. Justin McGuire, the founder of MCG Talent. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thanks.
Well, let's take a quick look at some of the other stories from the week. Amidst a spike in housing costs, the Saudi authorities have announced a freeze in rental prices in Riyadh for the next 5 years. Well, the new rules have now taken effect and apply to both residential and commercial properties. Well, according to some reports, apartment rents in Riyadh have soared 15% during the first 6 months of 2025, whilst villa rates have climbed 8%. In a sign of deepening economic and trade ties between Riyadh and Beijing, Saudi Arabia has signed a raft of some 42 MOUs with Chinese business leaders. These deals, which were signed on the sidelines of the Saudi-Chinese Business Forum in Beijing, have a combined value of more than $1.74 billion, and they're in the fields of energy, mining, and semiconductors, amongst other things. While China is the kingdom's largest trading partner. And Saudi Arabia's investment minister Khalid Al-Faleh is hailing strengthening economic ties with France. Addressing the French-Saudi Economic Roundtable in Paris, the minister said there's been a 180% increase in the volume of French direct investments in Saudi Arabia during the past 5 years. While non-oil trade between the two countries surpassed $5.3 billion in 2024, covering multiple sectors including energy, infrastructure, and tech. Well, we're going to stick with the same theme of recruitment trends in Saudi Arabia, and we're joined here in the studio now by Dr. Trefor Murphy, who is the founder and CEO of Fitch, a leading recruitment and HR advisory consulting firm here in the GCC. Now, Trefor, we're also going to be talking about a new report you've just published. It's entitled Redefining Work, AI and the Future of Talent. So we'll come on to that in just a moment. Meanwhile, welcome.
Thank you very much.
I just want to start by asking you what your sort of overarching thoughts are on the jobs market in Saudi Arabia right now, and just picking up on what we were discussing with Justin. I mean, are you seeing any significant shifts in trends, hiring patterns in the market?
Yeah, for sure. I think in the last quarter, we've seen just a little bit more clarity about who's getting investment, who's getting funding, particularly in the public and semi-public sectors. So we've seen a bit more clarity. I think there's a lot more alignment on what projects are going to be funded, which one are going to be sized a little bit differently. So that's very important in terms of providing clarity on recruitment and search work. So we've certainly seen that projects with better return on investment or perceived return on investment. There's a number of strategic projects that will keep getting investment. There's certainly a lot of realignment in some of the bigger projects, some of the real giga projects in Saudi Arabia. And we're certainly seeing that some of the projects with strong timelines, so time-based projects such as the Asian Cup, Asian Games, Expo and World Cup, really seeing where there's going to be a huge amount of growth.
Okay, any sectors that are sort of standing out as having a particular dynamic to them when it comes to recruitment?
Yeah, for sure. Look, I mean, real estate has moved very much from the design development component of projects to really getting through with the execution now and getting build in place. So that's certainly been one. But we've seen, there's a raft of sectors that are doing well. Energy, particularly in the mining and mineral side, recent announcements for Madden in terms of growth and doubling in size over the next couple of years. So that's quite significant. Finance is growing very strong, particularly in the private sector, financial services, private sector, but also at government level. Tourism, education, all getting significant funding to allow for good public sector growth and jobs, which is very important, but also encouraging the ecosystem on the private sector side to really grow out businesses to support with that growth.
Okay, and we were talking about Saudiization just there with Justin. I mean, is that something that sort of will eclipse as time goes by international hiring? Is that something you see as being a likely consequence of Saudiization, that slowly, little by little, we'll see perhaps fewer and fewer international placements and more local talent?
I mean, I think, look, it's a huge important play in Saudi Arabia that they're educating and growing and developing their own workforce. But we see every time there's a new sector that gets developed, there is a significant requirement for a timed period for bringing in SMEs from the global markets. And then as soon as there's a transition and training and knowledge transfer, that transitions back to a strong preference for Saudi talent, which is more than fair, I think. But there's always the next thing. There's always a sector that requires a bit more support. If we look at C-level, executive level hiring in the last couple of months, I would say it's been a real mixed approach to whether it's an expat or a Saudi talent that they've hired. There are embedded talent pools that support a great level of skills and expertise, such as HR and finance, at sea level. The CEO market is predominantly Saudi nationals as well. And then there are other areas like digital and data, AI, where that talent pool just hasn't the depth to it at the moment. So I think it's going to be a mix of predominantly Saudi talent with always a need for either a very specific knowledge skill set or a particular change or transformation project, as a lot of the government entities are going through big transformation projects now as well.
I think last time we spoke, we were talking about how there are these myths and misconceptions about packages in Saudi Arabia, and we were talking with Justin just now about, this idea that, Cristiano Ronaldo has sort of blazed the trail for salaries, and if you go and live in Saudi Arabia and you get recruited to head up a big firm, you might have a salary just like him. Do you think those myths are slightly being done away with? So people starting to realise the reality is not a Cristiano Ronaldo salary?
Of course, I would be in Riyadh today if that was the case. So no, look, I think there's very little differential between what the UAE will pay in salaries and what Saudi will pay in salaries. Maybe marginal, strong single digit, 8-10% max of a differential. A number of years ago, it was different. And I think it's merged into a country and into cities where they're very livable for expats. They're also competing with Saudi talent. This is not we just want to have nationals working for us. This is CFOs in Saudi are as good as CFOs internationally. And it's taken a decade of really strong learning and education and some knowledge transfer from the expats that maybe spent a lot of time there up until recently. But there are very little difference between salaries in Saudi and UAE. But it's still in the top 75 percentile of global salaries, even before you look at the tax differentials between Saudi and working in other countries.
Okay, well, let's turn our eye to your report, Redefining Work, AI and the Future of Talent. Now, when you started out on this report with your team, what were you seeking to find out?
It's a great question. I think we just wanted to really understand, outside of the hype around AI, how is this going to impact the workplace? People talk about, I've been listening to decades of people saying we'll all be replaced with robots of one kind or another. And we wanted to see what's the reality of the impact of AI for now and into the future. And what we've seen is very, very interesting, which is very little impact in the jobs market. So what we are seeing is that at enterprise level, the success of organizations to use AI at enterprise level, so all the organization using AI and driven from the top down, what kind of efficiencies they're getting and what is that going to mean to jobs and people's careers. And this year, for the next 12 months, we see very little change. And there's an MIT report brought out a couple of weeks ago that stated that 96% of AI initiatives that are at enterprise level have failed or are failing to give any real operational efficiency, not even cost reduction or jobs reduction, operational efficiency. So what we wanted to also see is how we compare in the GCC, in Saudi versus what's happening in Europe, what's happening in the States and what's happening in Asia. And we are tracking in some areas on par with what's happening in different sectors, and others we're slightly behind in terms of how we scale up. I think everyone is using AI now. We're using it on an individual basis. 90% plus are using AI on an individual basis. But what's been interesting is, as you bring that to an enterprise level, it's showing very little improvement so far.
Okay, so what's your sort of overall finding that AI, it sounds like you're saying it doesn't necessarily mean large-scale job cuts and the elimination of roles. That's not something that's happening.
Not something that's happening. Look, it doesn't mean, so what we're seeing is that the feedback is that there's still quite a bit of optimism around AI and what it can generate in the future. But the technology to use what AI can do in terms of its speed, its processing capability, its ability to help make better decisions, has not been implementable into CRMs or systems to allow for that speed and that technology to help with the day-to-day activity for jobs at enterprise level.
Any companies out there, particularly in this region, that are just saying no to anything AI? They're not interested. They're not launching any studies. They're just basically disregarding it and carrying on as before.
No. Everyone is spending.
Everyone's on board
across the board. 98% plus organisations have allocated the budget to AI.
And that depends, and the amount they're allocating obviously will depend on how big the company is
or how much. So there's a lot of pressure on boards and CEOs downward to make AI work, bring some efficiencies in. So the pressure is coming from that side, but there's a couple of flaws. There's no our challenges. There's no real AI training or development being brought in. There's no single owner of AI, so it's very fractionalized. One department's doing one thing, someone else is doing something very different. So there's no ownership within that. So I think the technology has not caught up with what AI can do, what it can generate, and improvements it can make. And until that happens, it'll still be used on an individual basis, but no real strong enterprise value in the very short term.
Okay, well, I'm being told we're out of time. So thank you very much indeed, Trefor Murphy, the founder and CEO of Cooper Fitch. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Let's take a quick look at some company news for you. The US aircraft manufacturer Boeing has signed an MOU with Saudi Arabia to explore partnerships and investments in advanced air mobility sector. Well, innovation, sustainability and local industry development are central to that agreement. The aviation sector is a major focus of Vision 2030 as the kingdom positions itself as a global hub for business and tourism. The Saudi vacation rental company Gavin is aiming for an IPO in 2028. That's according to the company's CEO, Latifa Al-Tamimi. This announcement comes after the company said it had secured $72 million in Series B funding, which the company plans to use to expand internationally. Founded in 2016, Gavin competes with the likes of Airbnb and claims to have 44% market share in the kingdom. And the New Delhi-based venture debt firm Stride Ventures has entered the Saudi market, and the company says it's planning to deploy $200 million over the next 2 years. Well, Stride, which has been operational since 2019, says it plans to lend to a diverse mix of Saudi companies and that its first deal is a $33 million investment in the Saudi fintech startup Erad. And finally, Saudi Arabia celebrated its 95th National Day last week. Well, amidst the dazzling air shows, military parades and fireworks which lit up the Riyadh skyline in the national colour, green, there was a strong sense of pride. Well, these are pictures from the Pride of the Nation event in the capital, which was organised by the Ministry of the Interior and the General Entertainment Authority. Well, the day commemorates the unification of the kingdom in 1932 by King Abdulaziz Al Saud. And taking part in the celebrations were celebrities, local and foreign alike, amongst them the football star Cristiano Ronaldo. Well, we can listen now to what the Saudi actor Basil Al-Sal had to say.
Our feelings are indescribable today as we celebrate the 95th National Day. Thank God, it's an indescribable feeling, and we are grateful for the blessing of this country. We hope, God willing, that this country will always prosper. We always wish for it to be more secure and safe with greater development.
Okay, Saudi actor Basil Al-Sal speaking there. Well, I'm joined now by Jimrey Dapin, who is the founder and the managing volunteer of Filipinos for the Saudi Green Initiative. That is a volunteer organisation that's promoting sustainable and clean living through community-led activities like clean-up drives and planting trees. Jimrey, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Tell us a bit about your National Day celebrations. What do they look like?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here. It's my 5th year of celebrating Saudi National Day in Saudi Arabia. And though I'm an expat here in Saudi Arabia, I feel the sense of belongingness, and I feel I'm part of the kingdom. And the way I celebrate my National Day is about I'm always going to the desert with our volunteers to celebrate it in a more significant way.
Okay, well, we're going to be asking you about that, but I just want to pick up on the fact you mentioned you're not Saudi, but you feel like you're part of the nation, and you're in good company because Cristiano Ronaldo is also getting very involved in the National Day celebrations. Now tell us about your organization, Filipinos for the Saudi Green Initiative. What do you do?
Yeah, the Filipinos for the Saudi Green Initiative is a nonprofit and a micro-initiative volunteer team that aim to support the vision of Saudi Green Initiative as a volunteer expat. So we aim to collect 2,030 trash bags, plant 2,030 trees, and recruit 2,030 volunteers. And as you have noticed, it's all aligned to Vision 2030. So as of now, we have collected 6,200 plus trash bags. We have recruited 500 plus volunteers, planted 2,500 trees, and we have already 72 weekends. And most of all, we have recruited 20 plus nationalities.
Okay, so 2030 is the magic number, and that seems to have been very central to your initiative there. I mean, this is a business show, and I just want to ask you whether you think there are business opportunities that can be identified through green initiatives. What do you think?
Well, for me, I'm as a teacher and as a background in about economy and green sustainability. There are a lot of business that we can deal with this kind of thing. Example, we can do the business on startup projects for recycling facility. Like actually, it is starting now in Riyadh, where in Saudi Arabia in general, where there are reverse vending machines that collect trash. Then in return, it gives a coupon or discount to individuals who are putting the trash in the machine. And I think things like that can have more sustainability project or environmental project here in the kingdom or even outside the kingdom. So that's a huge deal.
Yeah, it's a really good example, and obviously the green economy is huge. I just want to ask you. I mean, I don't know how long you've been living in Saudi Arabia for, but what struck you the most about the direction the country is going in at the moment?
Yeah, personally, in my personal point of view, I'm an expat here, and I'm so happy that the kingdom is not forgetting the role of expats in nation building. So we are aware of the Saudization, but still, I'm so thankful that there's a percentage that the expat can be employed in a certain country. And I'm so proud to be here, and I'm planning to live here forever as long as the kingdom needs me, and as long as I have the knowledge and skills that I can share to the kingdom.
Okay, and Jimrey, just lastly, does it feel like Saudi Arabia is indeed the land of opportunities?
100%, 100%. That's the land and the home of hospitality, and it's the land of humanity, shall I say. I myself, I am a overseas Filipino worker in the kingdom for 5 years, and for 5 years, it changed a lot of my life. I have a very good life here, and it reflects back home to my family. I was able to send a decent salary and able to build my home. I travel around the world, and really it built my dreams, and I'm still continue dreaming to build more dreams and help others.
Well, that's great. I can hear that.
That's how I can see that the kingdom is really the kingdom of humanity.
All right, well, I can hear the sense of pride in your voice, and we really appreciate you sharing your perspectives on Saudi National Day. Thank you very much indeed, Jimrey Dapin, founder and managing volunteer of Filipinos for the Saudi Green Initiative. Thank you for your time. Well, that's all we have time for. Thank you for watching The Riyal Deal here on Al Arabiya English. Look forward to seeing you again next week. Until then, stay tuned.